Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Streamlining Your Business Processes with Power Automate. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Billy Howell. I actually lead the IT training and the IT consultancy here at ATI-Mirage. ATI-Mirage is based in Perth CBD with over 30 years in business and over 200,000 happy customers. We are a training specialist in IT, PD, wellness, and also we are a registered training organization. ATI-Mirage acknowledges the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional owners of the lands and the waters where Perth is situated today. And we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Your participation is really important today. I really encourage you to ask your questions in the Q&A that's provided in the Zoom interface. You'll find that located towards the bottom or center of your screen. So please use this for your direct questions. We will also, based on your questions, we will take some of those towards the end of the webinar, where Julie will open it up and answer your question for discussion. And also we will follow up any other questions as well if we run out of time after the event. So you'll see all the responses in respect of those questions. The chat is also available to share your thoughts, comments, and feedback as we go along. And just to let you know, this session is being recorded. We will provide a link to the session after the training. And also, we'll also share with you a copy of the PowerPoint slides in PDF format. And as I mentioned there, the Q&As will also be shared with you as well. I'm pleased to introduce Julie Dahl, and Julie will take you through today's topic. And Julie is our senior IT training consultant and has over 20 years of in-depth and breadth of experience in Microsoft Office products, as well as 365 applications, such as SharePoint, Power Automate, and Power Apps. And also Julie is an e-learning sort of trainer and developer. And she uses the product Articulate for those particular resources development. And also Julie is a technical writer. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. And Julie, over to you.
Thank you, Billy, and welcome to this webinar, everyone. Lovely to have your attendance. This webinar was born out of a client's request regarding a situation that they have in their organisation. What happens is customer inquiries come in through a Microsoft form, and the process they had originally was that somebody was responsible for checking the responses on a daily basis, determining who needed to follow up on the inquiries and emailing those inquiries on. However, they weren't keeping any record of who was assigned to each of the inquiries without going back through their Outlook. And some of the inquiries were falling through the gaps. The situation was made a little bit more complex as the people responsible for dealing with each type of inquiry rotate on a 3-monthly basis. So it was not really the same person all the time. It was going to someone different every 3 months. We had a discussion about what they wanted and what their needs were, and we came up with a list of requirements to meet this business need. What they wanted was to have the email sent automatically to the appropriate person when the inquiry was received. Keeping in mind that the email recipient needed to be dynamically chosen based on the inquiry type, and that needed to be able to be changed easily every 3 months. They also wanted to make sure they knew who the inquiry had gone to and track when they were followed up and whether or not the inquiry had been resolved. Now, of course, those two last things can't be done automatically, but they wanted a facility that they could easily check to see whether this had happened. And this sort of rounded out and enhanced their current processes. But in addition to that, they also wanted to go one step further. And they wanted to say that if an inquiry had been outstanding for more than 5 days and wasn't yet closed, they wanted a reminder email to go back to the assigned person for that inquiry. So we had a look at what we could do, and the solution that we came up with was a combination of SharePoint and Power Automate. What we wanted to do was create 2 different lists in SharePoint. The first list containing the inquiry type and who was currently assigned to it. And then the second list to contain all of the details of the form, plus who was assigned to it, plus the followed up. And then this is where Power Automate comes in, is that we were going to use Power Automate to automate this process, taking the information out of the form, finding out who's responsible, and then sending that person an email regarding this inquiry. A graphical view of this looks like this, where the form inquiry is received, and you can see that the Power Automate process retrieves the form information and populates the customer inquiries list, looks up the person responsible from the client contacts list and populates it, and then sends an email to that person. And that's for the first part of the process. The second part, the nice to have, also can be done with Power Automate. But this is a scheduled process. This happens on a daily basis. And what it does is it scans through the customer inquiries list, finding all of those that are still open and were received more than 5 days ago. And then it automatically sends an email to that person, reminding them that they need to follow up on it. To implement all of this, we needed a form, and the client already had a form. It was quite a straightforward form. It's done in Microsoft Forms. You can see that it asks for the customer's name, their email address, what their inquiry is concerning, and the description of the issue. And then we needed the two tables, or the 2 lists. The first one just containing the inquiry type and the person. And I've built those already, so you can see how they work. So here we have our inquiry topic, and that matches the information on the form. And then we have the person who is currently responsible, and every 3 months, this person's name can be replaced with the currently responsible for that topic. The second list contains the information from the form, and as well as the inquiry date, which is automatically populated with the current date, the person who is assigned to, which is where we want to record the information from the other list, the date it was followed up, and whether or not the inquiry is closed. And those 2, of course, are the manually entered fields that the assigned to person needs to complete. I do have a copy of that form here, that list here, and I've got a couple of records in here just so you can see how it works. So the customer name, email address, inquiry category, and inquiry description come straight out of the form. The inquiry date, as I said, was manually entered, and then the assigned to is populated through Power Automate from the other list. You can see I've put some conditional formatting on here, so it's easy to spot what is open and what is closed. And in my little sample data here, only one of the inquiries have actually been closed. So that's the foundation for what we want to do. And today we want to focus on the Power Automate part of it, which is actually building the automation of this process. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dive into Power Automate and have a look at how we can build this process. Now, my take on Power Automate is, if you ever want to do anything, check to see if there is a template that does most of what you want to do. And in our case, there is. So we're going to use the template, flesh it out, and then add to it. So I go to Power Automate, I go into my templates area, and I search the templates. Now, when you're searching templates, what you want to do is you want to put in the app names that you're working with. So I'm searching for SharePoint and Forms, and you can see that the template pops up nicely here, record form response in SharePoint. Now I'm going to open up the template, and the first thing it wants to do is act on my behalf. And you can see that I've logged in, so I can press continue. And the steps are displayed that are in the template. And if we have a quick look down here, we can see that we start off with a form. When a response is submitted, we get the response details from forms, and we add an item or a record into our SharePoint list. So it does quite a lot of what we want to achieve. So let's go through and fill it out. First of all, it needs to know which form we're working with. And then it needs to know which form we're working with again, and which list it's going to. So I'm choosing my SharePoint site, and the list that I want to populate is the customer inquiries list. When I choose the customer inquiries list, it comes up with the fields in that list and allows me then to match these to the form fields by use of the dynamic content. So the title in my customer inquiries list is the form response to full name. The email address is a form response to email address. The category is the what is your inquiry concerning bit. Just up back to the form so you can see it on the form. You can see here, what is your inquiry concerning? That's the category. And then the inquiry date's automatic, and the description is the form response to description of issue. Now, we can't do the assign to bit yet. We'll get to that in a moment. The date they followed up, the date the inquiry, whether the inquiry is closed or not. These are manual fields, but we can set this one to no to start with, because if it's a new inquiry, it's certainly not closed. And the inquiry status value is just one I put in there so I can do some little traffic lights. I'll show you that later. So now we can save this. And I'll go back out of it to this screen here. To test it, we need to add in a customer inquiry. Now, I'm just going to call it test 1 so we can keep track of what we're doing. And I will just pop in test 1 into here. There isn't validation in forms against email addresses, so unfortunately you can put things that aren't email addresses in here. Let's decide that we're going to have a look at a new order, and we're going to say, please contact me. When we press the submit button and go to our SharePoint list and refresh, we can see that the form responses have been stored in the SharePoint list. So we have achieved all of this straight away. However, what we want to do now is the next bit, which is where we get the information for who should be following up. To do this, we need to extract the contact email from the customer contacts list based on the inquiry type. These are the 3 steps we have in our flow at the moment, and we want to add this step in after we get the response details and before we populate the customer inquiries list. So to achieve this, we go back to our Power Automate, back to edit our flow. And we find where we get our response details and where we create the item. And we want to put the step in the middle here. So I click on the little insert new step icon, choose add an action. And this opens up a search box where all of the step actions for all of the apps can be found. So I find the quickest way of finding anything here is again to start with the app name, looking at a SharePoint step. What the object is, I'm looking for items, I'm looking for records, and I want to get them. So the items, get items SharePoint, retrieve records out of a list. So that's the one I want. And it says which site and which list. And this time is the customer contacts list. Now, this is going to return all of the records in that customer contacts list. However, I can filter these to only returning the one where the inquiry type matches. So I put a filter query in here that says title equals and the what is your inquiry concerning field from the form. Because remember, that was the matching one between the two. So this should now only retrieve the customer contact details for the matching inquiry type. So now, once I've got that information, I can go back to where it populates my inquiries list. And where it says assign to, I can pull up some dynamic content and get the person's email address. Okay, now this should do it. Let's save. And because we've already got a record in there that we did through our form, we can use that to test it rather than going back to the form and adding a new record. So I'm going to click on the test button. I'm going to go into the one that worked last time and see if our changes work. So I click on the test button. And I can now go back to our list, refresh. And you can see that the test one records appeared this time, and you can see that it's been assigned to Megan. Let's see if we've got the right person. So new orders, Megan. Let's have a look at our client contacts. New orders, go to Megan. Looks like it's working. That's great. So we have that little bit working as well. The next step that we want to do then is to send them an email with a link to the item to let them know that there's an inquiry they need to follow up on. So back to Power Automate, back to edit our flow. And what we've got here then is the current flow. Now I'm just going to mention the apply to each's bit here because Power Automate thinks that there might be multiple returns from that list that we looked at. It says run this code for each of those returns. So that's why we have the apply to each here. So I go into the create item and just check that everything looks good. Yep. And now this is after this one, I want to send the email. So I'm going to add an action. Back to our search box. And again, same structure. What is the app? What is the object? What do I want to do? Send an email, looks like the good step to choose. Now what I need to do is populate who the email goes to, what it's about, and include a link. So I click in the to box, pick up my dynamic content, and from the create item step, I'm going to choose the assign to email. The subject is going to be customer inquiry received from, and the title of the create item will give me the full name of the person who's inquiring. And then I'll just say click here for full details. And then there is a piece of dynamic content called link to item, which allows me to put a link in to the underlying item. So dynamic content is created by the previous steps and then can be used like you can see it being used here. So we can save. And I'm going to test using that trigger that we ran before. And this time, what we should see in our SharePoint list is another new entry showing it's to Megan. But the step we're testing here is whether or not an email was sent. So I'm going to go to my sent items, and you can see that email has been sent to Megan about a customer inquiry received from test 1. However, it's not quite perfect. The link to item dynamic content gives me a link to the item, but it doesn't make it clickable. So to make it clickable and to round this bit out, you actually need to use some HTML code. To do this, go back to our Power Automate, back into Edit Our Step. Back into our email step. And to create HTML code, you need to actually switch into Code View and write it yourself. So hop into Code View, and the tag that we want to use is the ahref tag. The ahref tag will create a clickable link. So I've just give us some room to work. And we want to go to the link to item. Going to close the tab, and I can then just neaten this up. And close the ahref. So I've got ahref equals the link, and then our text is going to be displayed. Let's test it. So save. I'm going to test it using previous one again. Go back to our list, just make sure we've got a new entry here. Yep, getting lots of these. Back to our email, and this time we can see that we now have a nice clickable link. And when I click on the link, it opens up the record for Megan to then do her work with. So when we have a look at what we wanted to achieve, we can see that we've actually met all of these requirements. The email recipient is dynamically chosen based on the inquiry type. The recipient can be changed and it will be reread. We can see who's been assigned because it's recorded in the inquiries list. And we can see if they've updated it to whether it's been resolved or not. However, even though we've got it working, we haven't actually tested whether or not the email recipient is dynamically chosen. We've tested it for one case, but we need to test it again. And also, we haven't really tested that it will work if the person assigned is changed. So before we go any further, I think we need to test those two things. And the way we test those is to enter a new form. Now, just go back here, these were all for new orders and they went to Megan. So this time we'll choose one of the other options. Go back to our form, we'll do a second test now. And let's do it for a complaint. And let's say order was late. And submit it. And when we refresh, we can see that test 2, which is a complaint, has gone to Lydia. If we go check our customer contacts, we can see that the complaints should have gone to Lydia, which it did. So that bit is working. But what happens if we change someone out? Let's change Megan out. So to change the person responsible, I click on new order, I remove Megan, add another staff member in, and that has been updated to our new staff member. So now what I want to do is go test a new order and see if it goes to Bill instead of Megan. We'll make this one test 3. Doing a new order. Stop being polite. And we submit it. Let's go check. Test 3, new order, goes to Bill. So we have tested that these two are working. And as I said, these two are manually driven. So that's the first part of the process. Now, before we do the second part of the process, let's go clean up our environment just so we can easily spot what's going on. I'm going to leave some of these tests here, but not all of them. And I'm just going to go to my Outlook and just delete everything my sent items so that we can see the new emails coming in. So that takes us to the second process. And the second process is if an inquiry is outstanding for more than 5 days, a reminder needs to be sent to the person assigned to it. To make this easy to see, I've actually got a different view here in SharePoint, where I've got all of our open orders only, the date that they came in, and how long ago that was. Now, I'm using a little traffic light system here to say, if it's more than 5 days ago, it should be red. And if it's less than 5 days ago, it should be green. So really what we want to happen is we want an email to be sent to Megan about Brian's inquiry and Lydia about Chris's inquiry. Okay, let's go build the Power Automate to do this. Now, this one's slightly different. There isn't a template for it, so we're going to have to build it ourselves. The solution that I'm showing you is a slightly complicated solution, and that's because the easy solution only works if you've got less than 8 records. Assuming we're going to have more, we're going to go for a slightly complicated solution. Ready to go? Back to Power Automate. This time we're going to create our own process. And because we want it to run daily, it's a scheduled cloud flow. We choose scheduled cloud flow and we need to give it a name. So I'm just going to say reminders for open inquiries. And we need to set up a few parameters about this flow. Now, the starting date and time is really only if you want to start it running in the future. So we're just going to ignore those 2 settings, but we certainly don't want it repeating every minute. We want it to repeat once a day. So once we've done that, we can click on the Create button, and that will start to build our flow for us. We can see our trigger here, the recurrence, and you can see that it runs every day. However, I want to burrow into this a little bit more and see what it's actually saying. So if I go to the advanced options, you can see that it doesn't know what time zone we're in. So let's fix that first. As I said, the start time doesn't really matter, so I'm going to take that one out. But it asks us now, what time do we want this to run? And I want it to run at 8 o'clock every morning. Now, when you're creating a scheduled flow, it will run immediately when you create it, unless there's a start time in here, and then it will run at 8 o'clock every day from now on, or whatever else you structure up here. So we're happy with that. And now we want to then build the flow. So what we're doing here is we want it to find all of the records in the customer inquiry list that are older than 5 days ago. And to do this, we need to create a variable that works out when 5 days ago was. And as I said, it's slightly complex, but hang with me. So we click on New Step, and we want to create a variable. And you'll see that there is a step here called Initialize Variable. We need to give it a name. So I'll say 5 days ago. And we need to give it a type. In Power Automate, dates are strings. So I will choose the string one there. And then we need to work out when 5 days ago was. And for this, we're going to use expressions in Power Automate. To get the current date, we're actually going to use the start of day function and tell it to take the current date and determine that. And that's just a really neat way of getting the current date. But we don't want the current date. We want 5 days ago. So what we're going to do is we're going to embed these functions in the add days function. The add days function is how you calculate with dates in Power Automate. The first parameter is the starting date, and the second parameter is how many days from that starting date do you want to go. And we want to go -5 because we want to go prior to the today's date. So once I've got my expression working, I pop in the OK, and it will build that variable for us. Now, of course, once we build that variable, we can use it. And what we want to do is want to use it to filter the items that we're getting from the customer inquiries list. So we need to go and get the items from the customer inquiry list. So add a step. Again, it's a SharePoint step. We're looking at getting records. So we're going to find some items and we're going to get them. Need to fill in which of our site and list we're looking at. And this is where we use our filter again. We only want to return those where the inquiry is not closed and it's more than 5 days ago. So let's go back to our list to just check our fields. So the fields we're looking at is the inquiry date. Actually, I'll go back to the other view to see it. So the fields we're looking at is the inquiry date and whether the inquiry is closed. So what I need to do is I need to start off with the inquiry closed. I need to say, is the inquiry closed equal to no? Now you do have to spell this right. So just double checking that I've got it right. Yep. And is the inquiry date less than our variable? Now that should retrieve a number of records, in our case currently 2. And then what we want to do for those 2 records is send an email. Now, because more than one record has been retrieved, we need to add that apply to each framework in. So I click on new step. I say apply to each. And I'm applying to each of the outputs from here. So it's just the word value. And then I get to choose what I want it to do. And what I want it to do is use Outlook to send an email. Who do I want the email to go to? I need the email to go to the assigned person. My subject is reminder. This person's inquiry is still outstanding. And I want to have a link to the item. And we all know now that we need some HTML code. So I'll switch in here straight away and do that. Again, we're using the ahref. Our link to item dynamic content. And close our tag. Now, as I said before, when you build a scheduled flow, it will run immediately. So I don't need to run it. I just need to go and see if it's run. Oh, 2 emails in my sent items. One to Megan saying Brian Smith's inquiry is outstanding with a link that shows me Brian Smith's inquiry. And the second one to Linda about Chris Green. If you remember rightly, but we can see it here, they were the 2 that are more than 5 days ago and both outstanding. So what we did there, we completed the second bit that every day this is going to run and it's going to send a reminder to the person assigned to it to remind them about it. So again, if we go back to our graphical view, the first solution that we implemented was our first Power Automate that works when a response is received in a form. And then our second Power Automate, which is the daily one we just done, which sends that reminder email. So that meets the requirements that we had at the start. And so I'm going to open the floor up now for any questions.
See my comments there as well, Julie, in the chat and the Q&A. Roger had a question there about the chat, but any chat questions to go in the Q&A.
Okay, so yes, feel free to pop anything into either chat, into the Q&A, whether it's chat or whether you have a question. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. Hopefully you're all busy typing. I'll give it a few more minutes.
Oh, here we go. There's a question.
Okay, so taking the first question, if the person responsible changed prior to the 5-day reminder, will the original responsible person get the email? So in this business case, I'll just go back to the requirements here. In this business case, once somebody comes off rotation, they're still responsible to fill up anything that they were assigned to originally. So the business case uses the information in the inquiries list that's been populated when it originally came in to send the assigned to me message. So in this case, it's not redoing this. It's looking at this and saying, you know, Megan was responsible here, so I'll remind Megan. Bill was responsible for this one, so I'll remind Bill. You can set it up that it would send a reminder to the new person, but in this business case, that's one of the reasons I wanted the assigned to here, because once it's been assigned to you, even if you're not in the seat anymore, you're still responsible. So I hope HE 75714, that answers your question. So the second question here is, how do you learn coding for Power Automate? Are there templates we can use for coding? There is a lot of resources online about the different types of expressions and the different types of code that you can use. In most cases, to meet the need you've got at the time, a Google search is a good way to go. But our Power Automate course does introduce you to various aspects of expressions as well as how to use dynamic content. So that's probably a good starting point. Once you get an idea, once you get a foundation for it, then Google can actually make a little bit of sense. There are templates to do the steps, but not so much the expressions or the HTML code. So I hope, anonymous attendee, that answers your question. If not, just drop another question in. Oh, thank you, Mariana. Oh, sorry, Mark. Well, come along for a SharePoint course and we will actually run through how to build a lot of these features in SharePoint. Kathy asks, can the email go to several people or a team instead? And the answer is yes. What you would need to do is you would need to put all of the people responsible into the customer contacts list. Or if it wasn't dependent on the inquiry type, you could just send it to a group of people. So it really depends on your business needs there. But yes, Kathy, you could definitely achieve that. So Tomik, the same thing, you would need to know that information. So Tomik's question was, how do you set up the email for multiple people, the person assigned and their boss? So there'd be two ways of achieving that. You could have another column here that says, what is their boss's email? Or if your organization is using Active Directory, you can actually pull that information out through the dynamic content. So it depends a little bit on your organization, but yes, you can definitely do that. So Roger, the license time, Roger asked what license is required. So the license that's required, there's about 27 different licenses. So there's quite a few that will meet the needs, but you're looking at your Enterprise 3 or your Enterprise 5 or your Business Premium, that type of license, because what you need, of course, is you need access to SharePoint and you need access to Power Automate. Now, the Power Automate licenses that I'm demonstrating here is the free Power Automate license. Depending on volume, you might need to go for a paid one as well. So but you're looking around the Business Premium or the Enterprise level. And our anonymous attendee again asks, can the SharePoint lists, can they be edited or updated? And the answer is yes. But you can restrict that based on permissions. However, it needs to be updated. because it needs to be updated so that Megan, Lydia and Brett and Bill can populate when the date that they followed up and whether or not the inquiry is closed. When you're working with SharePoint lists, you can't put security on a column. So if I give these people edit access into this list, they can change everything. However, this is where Power Apps comes in, because what I can do is if I created a Power App for them, I could restrict them only to being able to fill in the 2 columns that I wanted them to fill in. So at the moment, yes, everything's editable because it needs to be, because they need to be able to edit it. However, that can be further restricted through Power Apps, if you like. And we teach Power Apps too. So Janella asks, does Power Automate only work with Microsoft Forms, or can it automate information from other software systems? And the answer, Janella, is it can work in conjunction with, last time I checked, 541 different apps. So what needs to happen is that there needs to be connectors into those apps, but Power Automate has a large number of connectors into common apps. So when you go to Power Automate, just like I did a search for SharePoint and Forms, you can do a search for, let me say, Salesforce. And you'll see that there are a whole lot of Salesforce apps. So yeah, and pretty much most apps these days work with Power Automate. Some of them are premium apps, which means you need to pay more for them, but you'll just have to check. Roger asks, can we create a customized solution for a company if we can't do this ourselves? Absolutely. We're happy to work with you to help you achieve your outcome, whether that's us doing the work or providing customized training. So feel free to contact us for more details on that one. Can we use an Excel spreadsheet instead of SharePoint, says Amanda. Amanda, the answer is yes, but SharePoint will work with Excel, but, Power Automate will work with Excel, but only Excel stored in OneDrive. So as long as you're happy for a OneDrive to be used to store the Excel workbook, you can have Power Automate writing to Excel without a problem. And what format is a SharePoint list? Okay, anonymous attendee asked what format a SharePoint list is. It's columns and rows, just like you see in front of us, and you can then customize different views, like I did here, to show different columns, different filtering, different sorting, that type of thing. I hope that answers your question. If not, drop another one in for me. And that is the end of the questions at the moment, but I'll give it a few more minutes in case anybody has anything to come back on.
Is there one there on the end?
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. It is possible to interrogate a PowerPoint list with Power BI. And if I pop back to my full list, you'll notice that Power BI is part of this already. And therefore you can see that we can actually easily link in to Power BI from both ways, from this way into Power BI and from Power BI back to SharePoint. So definitely. I won't do that because Power BI is actually not set up on this machine. So that will just end up with lots of error messages. So we'll leave that one for now. But the answer is absolutely, definitely a yes. At the moment, Patricia, we are not, sorry, Patricia's question is, does the reply to an email change the status to closed? At the moment, that's not incorporated. You could, and I'd have to think about it just a bit, but you could use like the approvals app to say it's approved or closed. You can put custom answers into that, and the approvals app's response can be written back. So if I wanted to do something like that, Patricia, I would look at using the approvals app in conjunction with everything else we've used today and write the response back and use that to close it off in the list if we wanted to do that. So Kerry's question is, for people new to automating workflow processes, would you recommend that people take the intermediate advanced level SharePoint courses before taking the Power Automate course? Thanks, Kerry, for your question. My answer is, what are you going to use Power Automate with? If you're going to be using Power Automate with SharePoint, you really need a good understanding of SharePoint before you get into the Power Automate side. If you're using Power Automate with something else, then you could just do the Power Automate course as a standalone one. When it's looking at our SharePoint courses, we actually run two main SharePoint courses, which is the end user course. And that one gives you an introduction to lists and libraries, but also tells you how to make the front screen nice and pretty. As you can see, I've got all of this information on my front screen here, and that's all covered in our end user course. The site owner course does a lot more on lists and libraries, doesn't do anything on this front page making it look pretty, but it will also give you an introduction to Power Automate and Power Apps in that course, because we incorporate those two topics as a little bit of an introduction in there. But yes, if you're going to be using Power Automate with SharePoint, you want to have a good basis and understanding of SharePoint. Okay, for the question about the Power BI report builder and does Power Automate work with the Power BI report builder, I'm going to actually have to shelve that one and look at answering that one later. I don't know the answer to that question, so we'll have to follow up on that one and come back to you. And Kathy would like to know when our SharePoint courses are next run.
Oh,
now that will actually be shown in just a few minutes,
yes.
Kathy. So don't go away. Any other questions?
Just pass it back to me when you're ready, Julie.
Okay. I'll give it another minute just to make sure that people aren't in the middle of typing. Oh, Kevin has his hand raised. Kevin, are you able to drop that into chat if you have a problem? You've no longer raised your hand. Sorry, not into chat, into the Q&A. Oh, and if you like my traffic lights here, guys, that's our advanced SharePoint course. That's after the site owner one. It's a SharePoint list and library, SharePoint advanced list and libraries. And one of the things we do is we set up these little traffic lights.
Okay.
Well, that looks like all the questions. I will keep my eye on that just in case we get any late ones. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and pass you back to Billy.
So thank you, Julie, for a very informative session on how we can sort of streamline our processes using Power Automate. Some great questions there asked from the participants, and some great answers there as well, Julie, so thanks for that. If you are interested in developing your skills in the particular applications like Power Automate or Microsoft Forms or the SharePoint end user or site owner, I've just got them on the display there at the moment. You can see the dates available, and please check out our website as well as to the course contents. And just to let you know, Microsoft Forms is half-day course, and you can see obviously Power Automate is 1, and end user is 1 day, and the site owner is 2 days. At present, we're offering a 20% discount on recommended retail prices of these courses, and it is available on the courses displayed here. But you need to book before close of business on the 21st of July. And if you can mention the code ATI-Web20, then you will get the discount. Now, if you're interested in booking, please make your booking via hello@ATI-Mirage.com.au, or you can give us a call here at ATI-Mirage. But that is a limited offer, so if you'd like to take up that offer, please get in contact. We'd really love your feedback from today's webinar, and the easiest way to do that is really just to grab your mobile phone and turn your camera on, pointing to the QR code on the screen here, and then you click on that. That will take you to a Microsoft form. So I really appreciate your feedback. It'll only take you a couple of minutes to complete. If you're wishing to connect and via LinkedIn, we can find us on social media. And also, if you'd like to leave a review on Google 5-star custom reviews, that would be appreciated. Or we are on social media such as Facebook as well. So the webinar has concluded today. So really thank you for your time today. And we can actually still pop in your questions if you want to in the Q&A. That will remain open for the next couple of minutes. And like I say, we'll follow up all these questions and we will share the answers with you. And thank you for joining us today. And we will look forward to seeing you on our next webinar very soon. Thank you.